Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most dramatic developments in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Reports have emerged suggesting that one of Russia's most vital strategic lifelines has been destroyed, sparking questions about what this means for the war, for Russia's military capabilities, and for the broader global balance of power. Russia's military strength doesn't just rely on troops, tanks, and missiles. It depends heavily on its vast logistical and supply network, the arteries that move fuel, ammunition, and equipment from the Russian heartland to the front lines. These lifelines are what keep Russia's war machine running. But recently, parts of this network have been severely disrupted, possibly due to Ukrainian long-range strikes or sabotage deep inside Russian territory. The destruction of such critical infrastructure represents a major blow to Moscow's ability to sustain its operations. The lifeline in question reportedly involved a series of fuel and transport pipelines that have been essential in keeping Russian operations in motion. These aren't ordinary industrial assets. They serve as the logistical backbone of Russia's war effort. When they're hit, the ripple effects spread far beyond the immediate area. Armored divisions can't advance without fuel. Artillery units can't fire without ammunition supplies. Every kilometer of damaged infrastructure makes it harder for Russia to project power effectively. For months, Ukraine has been warning that it would take the fight beyond the front lines, targeting the logistics, supply depots, and energy routes that allow Russia to wage war. Now, it seems those threats have materialized. Ukrainian intelligence and Western sources indicate that deep strikes into Russian territory have hit key nodes of Moscow's supply network. These strikes are not random. They are deliberate, precision operations aimed at dismantling Russia's strategic depth, the very safety zone it has relied on since the start of the invasion. This raises an important question. What happens next? The destruction of a strategic lifeline is not just a symbolic victory. It could force Russia to rethink how it manages its entire war logistics. Moving supplies through pipelines is cheap and efficient. But if those pipelines are destroyed, Moscow will have to rely on alternative routes, truck convoys, rail networks, or even ships. Each alternative is slower, more vulnerable, and much more expensive. Fuel that once flowed easily now has to be hauled across vast distances, often through dangerous territory. That means more targets for Ukraine. Convoys can be ambushed, trains can be derailed, bridges can be bombed. Every time Russia adapts, Ukraine can respond. This dynamic creates a constant cycle of pressure, forcing Moscow to spend more on protection and less on offense. In modern warfare, logistics is often the silent battlefield, and right now, Ukraine appears to be gaining the upper hand there. The immediate effect of this lifeline being destroyed could be a slowdown in Russian military operations. If fuel deliveries are delayed, armored vehicles can't move. If ammunition supplies thin out, artillery fire decreases. Soldiers on the front could find themselves undersupplied, fatigued, and less capable of sustaining prolonged offensives. Russia's front-line commanders might be forced to ration resources, adjust tactics, or even pause certain operations altogether. At the same time, Russia is likely to respond in several ways. The first will be defensive, increasing air defenses and surveillance over its infrastructure, rerouting supplies, and accelerating repair efforts. But it may also respond offensively with escalated strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure, particularly energy grids and transport networks. Russia has used that strategy before, hoping to demoralize civilians and pressure Ukraine's government. Now, with one of its own lifelines cut, it may double down on that approach as retaliation, but the deeper consequence is strategic. When a major power's internal networks come under attack, it signals that the war's boundaries are changing. Until now, Russia has fought with the assumption that its homeland was largely insulated from direct hits. That psychological barrier is breaking down. Ukraine has demonstrated that it can strike inside Russia, not just on the front lines, but deep into the territory that Moscow once considered untouchable. This changes the calculus for both sides. For Ukraine, it's a morale boost and a message to its Western allies. It can use advanced technology, intelligence, and precision tactics to punch above its weight. For Russia, it's a warning that nowhere is truly safe. The Kremlin may need to divert significant resources to protect infrastructure, stretching its military even thinner. That could create openings for Ukraine on the front lines, as Russia shifts focus from offense to defense. Internationally, this development could reshape the conversation about support for Ukraine. Western countries that have been cautious about supplying long-range weapons may now feel vindicated. They can see tangible results, Russian logistics disrupted, morale shaken, and strategic depth eroded. But it could also spark fears of escalation. Moscow might interpret these deep strikes as Western-backed aggression and threaten to retaliate in unpredictable ways. That tension could complicate diplomatic efforts or peace negotiations. Looking at the bigger picture, the destruction of Russia's strategic lifeline also highlights how fragile modern warfare logistics can be. Large nations often assume that their vast territory gives them invulnerability, but in an age of precision drones, cyber warfare, and long-range missiles, geography offers less protection than it used to. Even infrastructure hundreds of kilometers from the front is vulnerable. This has global implications, not just for Russia. It's a lesson for all military powers. Control over logistics is as vital as control over territory. Let's consider the domestic implications for Russia. Any disruption to its infrastructure risks causing ripple effects in its economy. If fuel pipelines are damaged, domestic energy prices could rise. Industries dependent on oil transport may suffer. Supply shortages might emerge in regions near the war zone, and public frustration could build, especially if the government diverts resources to the war effort instead of domestic repair. That internal strain could further challenge Moscow's ability to maintain long-term public support for the conflict. For Russian soldiers on the front, the consequences will be immediate. Shortages could limit mobility, reduce combat effectiveness, and lower morale. Troops already facing exhaustion may find themselves fighting with dwindling supplies, unreliable reinforcements, and delayed evacuations. Every broken supply route adds to the pressure. This psychological burden can become as destructive as physical damage. From Ukraine's perspective, these strikes demonstrate strategic evolution. Early in the war, Ukraine focused primarily on defense, holding cities, repelling invasions, and fortifying lines. Over time, it has adapted, learning how to combine intelligence, precision weaponry, and unconventional tactics to strike where it hurts most. Targeting logistics, not just troops, is part of that maturation. It's how smaller militaries counterbalance a larger, better resourced opponent. However, Ukraine must tread carefully. Hitting targets deep inside Russia carries political and ethical risks. Western allies have often drawn red lines about how far Ukrainian operations should go, fearing escalation into a broader war. Each successful strike raises questions about where that line is, and whether crossing it could provoke an unpredictable response from Moscow. Balancing strategic necessity with international diplomacy will be key to Ukraine's next steps. For Russia, rebuilding the damaged lifeline will not be easy. Infrastructure repair under wartime conditions is complex. Resources are limited, transport routes are under threat, and engineers face constant danger. Even if Russia manages to repair the damage quickly, the mere fact that it happened proves that Ukraine can strike again. That lingering vulnerability forces Russia into a perpetual state of defense, and defense is expensive. Over time, this could wear down Russia's economy and war stamina. Every bridge rebuilt, every pipeline repaired, every convoy protected consumes manpower and money that could have gone toward offensive operations. The longer the war drags on, the more those hidden costs accumulate. Eventually, it becomes a question of sustainability. Can Russia afford to keep repairing and fighting indefinitely? Or will the pressure push it toward negotiation? There's also the matter of international optics. The world is watching closely. Each Ukrainian strike inside Russia sends a message. Ukraine is not powerless. It can retaliate, it can innovate, and it can adapt. That strengthens Kiev's position both militarily and diplomatically. But it also raises the stakes for everyone involved. The closer the war creeps to Russian territory, the greater the chance of broader instability, something global powers are eager to avoid. In the coming months, observers should watch for several signs. Will Russia's fuel convoys increase on major transport routes, indicating pipeline disruption? Will Ukrainian drones or missiles continue striking infrastructure deep inside Russian regions? Will the pace of Russian offensives slow down? These indicators will reveal whether the loss of this strategic lifeline is temporary or the start of a long-term shift in the war's dynamics. If Russia cannot compensate for this loss, we may see a gradual weakening of its ability to project sustained power. Its offensives could become less frequent, more localized, and less coordinated. The logistical strain might even lead to visible cracks in command structures or internal blame games among military leaders. When supply chains falter, frustration grows, and operational cohesion suffers. For Ukraine, the path forward involves balancing aggression with prudence. Each successful deep strike must serve a purpose to weaken Russia's capacity, not just provoke it. That requires intelligence, coordination, timing, and strategic clarity. Ukraine's goal should be to keep Russia guessing, stretching its defenses thin, while avoiding unnecessary escalation that could drag NATO into direct confrontation. In the long run, this kind of warfare, targeting supply chains rather than cities, might shape how conflicts are fought globally. Modern wars are becoming less about territorial conquest and more about economic and infrastructural paralysis. The country that can most effectively disrupt its enemy's logistics wins not by overwhelming numbers, but by persistence and precision. Ukraine's campaign against Russia's lifelines is a real-world demonstration of this evolving doctrine. The destruction of Russia's strategic lifeline may not end the war tomorrow, but it could mark the beginning of a shift in momentum. Each disrupted supply line erodes Russia's confidence. Each successful strike proves that Ukraine can adapt faster than many expected. The psychological impact on soldiers, on citizens, and on leadership could be as powerful as the physical damage itself. Ultimately, the question of what happens next depends on how both sides respond. Russia may escalate, Ukraine may push further, diplomacy may intervene, but one thing is certain: the war's center of gravity is changing. The days when Russia could wage this conflict with impunity from deep within its own borders are over. The battlefield has expanded, and so have the risks. So, as this story develops, remember that wars are not only fought with weapons, but with logistics, strategy, and willpower. The destruction of this lifeline shows how fragile even the strongest military power can be when its foundation is shaken. The next chapter in this conflict will depend on how effectively Russia can rebuild, and how boldly Ukraine can capitalize on this moment. Thank you all for watching. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more updates as we continue to follow how this war evolves and what it means for global stability in the months ahead.